Welcome, and thank you for joining me today. I'm so grateful to have you here, sharing in this space of growth, healing, and transformation. If you've already subscribed to Loving Everything, thank you for being a part of this beautiful community. Your support means so much, and together, we're creating a space where love in all its forms can be explored and embraced. As you listen to this episode, if it resonates with you, I invite you to like the video and share it with anyone who might benefit from the insights we're diving into today. These conversations are all about expanding our capacity to love ourselves, each other, and the world around us. And if you enjoy what you hear, don't forget to explore my other episodes where we journey into love's deepest, most unconditional forms. Each one is an invitation to reconnect with the parts of yourself that are waiting to be seen, healed, and loved. So thank you for being here. Let's begin. Hello, Nick.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me today.
My pleasure.
I'm really excited to speak with you and have a conversation. Hopefully, I learned some new things from you. I was really impressed by your presentation that I had the chance to partake in.
Thank
you. You are a wealth of knowledge in this field. So
Thank you very much.
I'm really, really excited to hear your thoughts on some things. So
I hope I can make it interesting.
I'm sure you will. I have no doubt. Okay, so we'll start with, what did you love doing as a child, and how do you think it shaped who you are today?
Wow. What a great question. Let's see. What I loved doing as a child was swimming.
Really?
Yeah, I was raised in a pretty dysfunctional family, and my getaway was the swimming pool. And I spent a lot of time in the summertime in the swimming pool. Yeah, I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. It's a great question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the swimming had an impact on who you are?
Yeah, it does. I think that it did, especially for, if I'm trying to explain to folks the value of self-care. I think that it's a really good thing, not to, equate dysfunction to the people that are working in the field, right? But the fact that, like, you have to have something in your life that gives you, excitement outside of work, that you can have that rest period.
Do you still swim?
Yeah, I love swimming. Yeah, I wish I could do it, on a more regular basis, but definitely when I'm traveling, I always look for hotels. When I'm going to go speak somewhere, I always look for hotels that have swimming pools, because I'll spend the evenings in the pools.
Really?
Yeah,
You're
fun.
like a fish.
Not really like a fish. A little bit bigger than a fish, but I do love to swim. Yeah.
That's cool. Can you share a childhood memory that you've never shared with anyone before?
Oh my gosh. I feel like I should have had these questions ahead of time.
Oh no, take your time. There's no rush.
Memory.
And if you can't remember anything, that's okay too.
Can we bounce around and come back to it?
Yeah, of
okay,
course.
Great. Because then I can come up with something. It'll happen.
Yeah. What was it like growing up in your family? Can you describe the relationships and dynamics that you witnessed?
Okay. I am the only product of my mother and father. The only product. My mother brought two other products to her marriage with my father, and they were substantially older. Well, they still are substantially older than me. I have a brother that's 9 years older and one that's 13 years older.
Wow.
But yeah, like I said, I'm the only child of my parents. So I was, brother was 9 years old when I was born, and my parents had been married for about 14, 15 months, something like that, when I was born.
Okay.
And they had only known each other for a couple of weeks before they got married. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yep. And, there was a point in time in my life that I really never wanted to discuss it or talk about it, but because it was embarrassing. But
was it?
No, not that part. The next part I'm ready to talk about. Yeah. So my mother was somebody that was born and raised on a carnival. And so she worked with, the carnival her entire life. even up until the point that I was born. So she traveled with the carnival. My maternal grandfather was a clown, and was a pretty well-known clown on the carnival circuit for whatever that's worth.
No way.
Yeah, and then
that is so cool.
My father's family were they kind of just went with the crops. So they traveled with the crops. And so my mom and dad met in Oregon, and probably never would have met here because neither one of them were from Oregon. So it was just kind of serendipitous. Well, at the time it was serendipitous. Probably not a good thing in retrospect because they didn't last very long married. But
hey, you were a product of that.
Right, yeah. So I was the first person.
You're pretty great.
Oh, thanks. Appreciate that. I'm the first person in my family to have ever went to college and graduated from high school, and they just didn't find value in that. In
education.
Yeah, my dad's dad, my paternal grandfather, told me one day that the only reason to have kids is so that they can help you work.
Yes, well, that was a generational thing. That was a thing.
Yeah, it was.
Because we had farms and you needed hands.
And so my dad's one of 7 brothers and sisters, and they were just like barely old enough to be.
Yeah, clockwork.
Yeah, exactly. Like 10 months to a year apart from each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a lot of mouths to feed.
It is, yeah.
That's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Okay, now back to the circus. Sorry, I'm fascinated by this.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, it's so cool. Okay, so maybe not so cool to you because you grew up with it, but like...
Oh, no, there was no carnival after I was born. I have zero memory of that whatsoever. My mom, I don't want to say retired, but she was done with that.
What did she do?
She actually owned a bunch of concessions, but that's not how it started. So my grandfather, that I just said was a clown, he and his wife, my grandmother, put my mother into like different, I don't know what they're called, concessions or something like that, where like, the people walk in and they see the little head bobbing in the swimming pool and they think it's just a headless person or a bodiless person.
Yeah,
so that would be my mom inside there as a kid.
Okay.
And she told me as I got older, like the tricks behind that and how they did that. And then my mom did trapeze stuff too. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Yeah. So I come from a very interesting family.
An entertainment industry family.
That sounds a lot fancier than what I was thinking, but yeah, I guess.
My grandmother was a vaudeville dancer, so
nice.
I had some entertainment running through my ancestry too.
Nice.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And vaudeville dancing wasn't exactly looked up to.
Right.
Yeah. So, I get it. My mom was not proud of that.
Yeah.
Not proud at all. Yeah.
And I guess I found out later on that my grandmother, so my mother's mother, was also what they called her, a burlesque dancer in Las Vegas.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they had a fancier name for it, but
that's pretty much what it was. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. So we have that in common. So what was it like growing up in your family?
It was interesting. I mean, my mother is going to be 80 years old, as is my dad, and they've been divorced for a lot of years, but, I'm hoping that neither one of them hear the podcast. They're not really podcasty type people. So I hope they don't really hear it, but yeah, they're extremely dysfunctional. And I kind of thought that, that was just the way that every family was.
Yeah.
And I remember.
So you didn't question it at all. You were just like, this is how family is.
Yeah, I didn't question it until I went over to a friend's house for dinner one time, and the dad sat down after he got home from work, and he asked his wife how her day was, and then to the son how his day was. And I was looking around like, you've got to be kidding me. What is this?
Yeah.
And I thought it was a show they were putting on for me. I thought that's not what there's no way people do that. And he was genuinely interested in their days, and there was dialogue back and forth, and they discussed dinner and what they were going to do tomorrow. And I don't remember eating a bite of my dinner. I was just looking around the table like, you've got to be joking. This really happens?
Yeah. Huh. That's interesting. I knew, so I come from dysfunction too. I knew that my family was dysfunctional, and I kept asking or basically confronting my family, specifically my mom, about it. And she used to say, you think this is different. It's like this everywhere. Everyone has it. So my experience was exactly the opposite. And then I did go over to a friend's house in like junior high, and I was like, yeah, people do act differently. Yeah, confirmation. So that's interesting. Okay. And what is one of your earliest memories of feeling love, and who was it with?
Oh my gosh. Another great question. So we're going to be jumping all over the place. I was married once before my current wife.
Okay.
And I think it was all of what I experienced as a child and what I experienced with my first wife to understand what love actually was when I got married to my current wife, who is my last wife. So I don't think I ever really experienced that. Like, and obviously it's a different kind of love between your parents and, your spouse, but I don't think I ever really experienced that knowledge that I was loved like I do with my wife.
Current.
My only wife.
The first wife, not so much.
Yeah, not so much. And I guess I didn't really realize it at the time, but it took that, marriage, very short-lived marriage, but it took that marriage to realize that, like, that wasn't love.
Why do you think that you got married?
The first time?
Yeah.
Because I think I was duplicating what my parents were. I think I was,
Because you thought you needed to?
I think it was just that I thought that's what the model was.
Okay.
And I was really young too, young.
And so going off of that model, was your first marriage rather dysfunctional?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and very short-lived.
Okay.
Like, we weren't married but 18 months.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. No children from
No
that
children.
marriage. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So your earliest memories of feeling love then is with this current wife?
Yeah, because, we've been together for a long time. So, yeah, that goes back a ways. But, yeah.
Okay. How old were you when you got married the second time?
Oh, gosh. Married? We got married in 2009.
Okay.
So
it has been a while.
Yeah, I went to a liberal arts college. Math's not my strong suit, but
that's okay.
2009, and I'm going to be 49 tomorrow. So that's
your birthday's tomorrow.
Yeah. Wait a second. Is it the 7th?
Yes.
Birthday's Thursday, not tomorrow.
Okay. Well, happy early birthday.
Yeah. Thanks. I was. I think I was 31 or 32, something like that. Yeah.
All right. Okay.
But we've been together for 23 years.
Oh, longer.
Yeah. Way longer.
Okay. If you could change one thing about your parents or the way that you were raised, what would it be? Nothing. In retrospect, looking back at it, I think that the experiences that you live make you the person that you are. And I don't think, when I used to facilitate groups all the time, one of the questions I would ask to kind of spur the group along, and one of my favorite questions to ask was, if you could take a pill that would just get rid of your addiction altogether, would you do it? And it was always mixed bag of who was going to say yes and who was going to say no. And I wouldn't change that. I don't love the people that I had hurt along the way, but I love the way that my life turned out, and I wouldn't change that. And if I would have, had different parents, or if they would have done things differently, I would not have went on the same road, and I may not have met my wife, and that would have been like the worst possible outcome. That's really sweet. What is the most traumatic experience you've had in your life, and how does the residue of that experience show up in your present? Oh my gosh. I don't know that I could just narrow it down to one. Once again, I think that all of the experiences that I had in my life, I think led to, the person that I am, and led to the decisions and the career path that I chose. And also, like, I didn't have a good understanding of trauma until I was, a really good understanding of trauma until I was in my 30s. I just thought that people had terrible shit happen to them in their lives, and that was just the way that it went. Yeah. And I am always a little stunned to realize that there are few people out there that have never had anything bad happen. I know. I always sort of go into it. Isn't it crazy? Yeah. I always sort of go into it, especially with working with clients. I go into it like everybody has had some kind of trauma. Well, we have. I mean, we survived COVID. And so, there's really, that touched everyone. And so I think at this point, it's safe to say that everyone kind of understands something traumatic. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, and then even kids that were like my oldest daughter is 5, and she was basically a COVID baby. Yeah. And she didn't get the socialization. She wasn't around. She saw people with masks. Yeah, she didn't see people smile at her. Yeah. And I'm sure that it's going to manifest at some point in time. Hopefully, not in a huge way, but like it's still going to have its effect. Yeah. 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 Okay. So I was going to say maybe prison. No. No, prison was not. No, because I had a really interesting, I would say unique and interesting experience in prison. So I got clean
and decided I was going to change my life. And I made the decision to get clean. And then I got arrested for some things that had happened years previous. And so I actually went to prison clean. And so it was an interesting perspective for me. Most of the guys that I had went into prison with were just getting clean as they went in, forcibly got clean. And so they were detoxing or withdrawing or whatever. And for me, that was not the case. I was clean. I had already made the decision. I had about almost a year clean when I went into prison. And we knew that the prison date was coming. I couldn't avoid it. And so I just, I pushed it off
prepared.
as much. Yeah, and I was prepared. So, excuse me, I had a 48-month prison sentence, and I actually did 12 months, 2 weeks and 4 days. Not that I was counting or anything, but
of course you were counting.
Yeah.
Who's not counting in that environment?
And the reason that I got lucky with almost a 3-year time cut off my sentence is because they had just started this alternative incarceration program that I was eligible for. And my attorney worked really hard to make sure that I got eligible for it, which meant that if you did this very intense residential program in prison, that if you passed and you did all the things that they asked you to do, they would shave the rest of that time off. But when you got out, if you screwed up one time, you were going back for all of it. So when I got out, I didn't jaywalk. I didn't do anything. But I was in just like a regular prison for a couple of months before I got shipped to the prison that had treatment in it. So I did like 8.5 or 9 months of my year in this treatment environment that if you took the clothes off of the people and put regular clothes on them, you wouldn't think is a prison.
Interesting.
In fact, you could, at the time, there's a fence around it now, but at the time I could have just walked right off the property, walked down the street. And there were people that did that. There were people that did, but it's in Baker City, and it was in the middle of nowhere. And so you're not going anywhere when there's 9 feet of snow on the ground, right? Like it's just.
Yeah, I know where Baker City is.
Yeah. So when I asked the officer one time, I was like, people just walk away. He goes, yeah, but they always come back.
Yeah.
Because it's really cold. Yeah, they always come back.
Yeah.
And they would test.
You don't have a jacket.
Yeah. No, yeah, they would test folks, and like what they did with me, and they said. We take the garbage out, and I took the garbage out, and it was at the end of the street. It was at the end of the parking lot. So, like, I'm out there watching cars go by and turn around and walk back inside. So there was all kinds of tests going on there and making sure that you were going to be the model citizen that you were portraying yourself to be.
Yeah.
And fortunately for me, I was through that program, and I got that huge time cut. But very shortly after I got out of prison, there was a guy that I was actually in the program with that careened off of Marine Drive and killed a family and went into the water, and his passenger drowned, and he had a huge time cut as well. And that was the end of it. They said, we're not doing this anymore because, the public was upset.
Yeah.
They're like, he was supposed to be in prison.
Yeah.
And so they weren't doing those huge time cuts anymore. It's not abnormal to get like a month or two off your sentence if you complete the program, but it's not a 3-year thing.
Yeah.
So I consider myself very, very lucky that
That's good timing.
And I got, with very clear and crisp vision and eyes, I got to see what prison was like and understand that I don't want to do that again.
No.
I don't want to go back there.
No, I don't either.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone can spend time there and want to go back.
Well, people go back, and I think it's just, I got a lot of feelings on how and why they go back. But,
so tell us more about that.
Well, I think that
there's some safety there.
Yeah, well, sort of like what I was saying about, I just thought that this is the way that families were raised. Mm-hmm. I think that people understand after a while that that's their expectation for themselves. They think that that's what they're just going to do. And they become okay with the idea of going back to prison. I have cousins that I dearly love that have been in prison so many times that we can't count. And they're in their 50s and they're doing the same thing. And they've been doing it since they were old enough to go into prison.
Yeah.
And I think it's just this mindset that they get out and they run as long as they can until they get caught, and they go back and they know they got caught, and then they go to prison. They do a 1 to 5 year sentence or whatever for some pretty basic, menacing tweaker shit, and then they, get out and do it all over again.
Would you consider that to be, referred to as like being institutionalized? Like
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. People get institutionalized when they've been in prison, and then they just expect that that's what they're going to do, and they expect that that's what their life is going to look like. And I think that if that's where you are settled at knowing that's what your life is going to look like, then there's not a lot going to talk you out of it.
Right.
And I don't think it's right. It's just something that I've, noticed. Yeah.
Yeah.
And even working in, for people who are listening, I got my record expunged, and then I went to work for the prison several years later.
Yeah.
And was the behavioral health services manager for a couple of the institutions. And I got to see firsthand from a different perspective the people that are in there that really honestly just needed more hugs when they were a kid.
I know.
They're not career criminal type people. They're just walking around scared, peacocking so that people don't mess with them.
Yeah.
And they just needed a pat on the back and told they were a good kid and they were loved.
I know.
And there are some people that definitely need to be there, right? But there are so many, by and large, the majority of the people that are there just needed to be told they were loved and a pat on the back or a hug every now and then. Probably wouldn't have ended up there.
Yeah. It's really sad.
Totally sad. Yeah.
I mean, my experience was devastating, but okay. So we talked about that. Can you tell us more about the events that led to your meth addiction and your incarceration?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that for me, I actually, when I did never graduate high school. I left high school when I was 15 or 16. I don't remember what it was. And actually, in fact, fun story, the very first document I ever forged was to get my GED. And, I was telling somebody the story one time. So I took this is way back when. This is when I was, 100 years ago. So I took a Xerox of my birth certificate, and then I cut out with the razor blade the number to make myself, old enough to take the GED because I was 15.
Oh, my God. I used to do that with my grades.
Nice. Yeah. So you know what I'm talking about.
Oh, yes.
So I did this, and I went and took the test and everything. So and I passed the test, and I got the GED. So I'm telling somebody the story later on. They're like, why didn't you just forge the GED? And I was like, oh, my God, I never thought about that, But I got this GED when I was 15 instead of 16. So it says that my birthday is 1975 when, in fact, it's 76. And I had always worried about the fact that, one day I was going to get caught, right? It was going to come back and I was going to get caught. But I digress. So I went right to work, and I didn't have a felony record. So I went right to work, and I was trying to get myself good jobs that I knew I could, feed a family at some point in time or live off of. Mm-hmm. And I ended up working for the bank. And
which bank?
U.S. Bank.
Okay.
I spent a number of years working for U.S. Bank as a personal banking officer.
Okay.
So open up accounts and investments and that sort of thing. And it was a pretty okay job, but it was right about that time that I was in this relationship and it went bad and the marriage went bad. And I didn't.
Okay, so this is when you were married.
Yeah, and I lacked what I would call adequate coping skills to deal with that situation.
You had some maladaptive tendencies?
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. It's a very clinical answer, but yes. So I had a friend at the time who had went through something similar, and he said, hey, I've got this thing that you could try that'll make you forget about all that stuff. And I was like, let's have it. And it was methamphetamine.
Did it help?
Immensely. Just when I had that drug on board, I didn't care about anything.
What do you care about when you're on meth?
Getting more meth, I think, is probably it.
That's it?
Yeah, I think that's probably the answer. Yeah, just get more meth.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, I understand why people do what they do, and I understand why they are, they're addicted and why they, chase after that drug. I get it. I understand it.
Why?
Well, because I think that most people, it wasn't because their life was going great, right? And they woke up one morning like, I think I'm going to try meth. I think it was that things were going really bad for them, and that was an answer.
Yes.
That was an answer. It wasn't the best answer. And then sadly enough, and anybody that's listening that's a normal person would just be completely floored by this, but if I got $1 for every time somebody said they did drugs with their parents, we'd be sitting down to a really nice dinner. And that's just terrible, They did drugs with they're not doing meth with their parents. No, absolutely.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. I'm not talking about like have a beer with their parents. I'm talking about meth or heroin with one of their parents. And they're not, they didn't sit down with them like, little Johnny, we're going to smoke meth tonight. It was just that they were doing it already and, broken home and things were bad. And they're like, what the hell here?
Wow.
And it's terrible. Yeah, absolutely terrible. And that was not my parents. My parents didn't do drugs. So I didn't know that story. That was not part of it.
And my parents didn't do them either. My dad was a DEA agent.
No way.
Yeah. He took down Timothy Leary and the Black Parents. He's pretty proud of it. Yes.
No way. Awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yes. And,
yeah.
yeah, he was a deputy. I was raised, we're approximately the same age. I was raised with, Nancy Reagan,
Just say no.
Just say no.
Yep.
And, your brain on drugs in a frying pan. And, after school specials were I was just talking about this a couple podcasts ago, after school specials, where like an addict was like somebody who like, well, I mean, I think we can't, it's very clear on what an addict is now, but back then, an addict was somebody that like slept in doorways and didn't have anywhere to go and like was disheveled.
Absolutely.
And it had a whole look to it.
Yeah.
And so, you know, the fact that people drank, I didn't see that as an addiction, right? Yeah. I you know, was socialized to believe that addiction meant, you know, like something street illegal, right? Yeah. With, you know, a needle in your arm, right, or, you know, something that was very, very serious.
Right. Not that the old lady next door.
Not that any of the other things aren't serious. Yeah. Yeah. Or don't lead to some similar outcomes, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay. Yes. I got off track there, talking about me, but let's see. You've spoken about looking for something that loved you about your addiction to meth. Can you expand on what that search meant for you?
What, repeat the first part of the question?
Well, I heard you say you were looking for something that loved you.
Yeah, I think that's more like now in my life as opposed to, you know, that's me trying to make an explanation of something in the past. I don't think I was conscientiously seeking that.
No.
Yeah, I think it's now me trying to make sense of what happened,
yes.
You know, looking back.
Sorry, it's out of context.
Yeah, no, it's totally fine. I just want to make sure I was on the same page with you. But yeah, looking back at it, I think I just wanted to have that feeling of like, you know, love and unconditional support and love. And I don't think that it was, I don't think I was thinking I was going to find it in meth or the great people that come along with that, right? No. I didn't think that was going to be the case, but I think that was just a way of me not feeling the things that I was feeling at the time. And the nice thing about, you know, doing drugs is that you don't have to feel those feelings, but it's like owing money to the mafia. You have to pay it back at some point in time, right? Like you're not going to get away without feeling those feelings. So it's either now or pay later. And so it's not like you get out of it.
No, you're just pushing it off.
And making more stuff happen on top of it, right?
Yeah,
like you're just making the job
so
harder.
Much more complicated.
And I think that when you phrase it to folks that are struggling in their addiction like that, and they're able to kind of get a little tiny glimpse of it, they're usually in awe and shook a little bit by it. That, oh my gosh, he's right. At some point in time, I'm going to have to pay the piper. It may not be today. Yeah. But at some point in time, I'm going to have to get clean. And if I don't, then I'm just going to have to live this miserable life forever. But the problem doesn't go away.
No. You just put the pause button on it.
Yeah, you just hit the pause button, right? Mm-hmm. And it's really ready for you as soon as and I was a mess when I first got clean. I know it's not part of your question, but
no, go tell us.
When I first got clean, my mom is, you know, in many ways a saint in the sense that, like, when I called my mom and I said, "Hey, I'm ready to be clean," she's like, "Come to my house." She didn't need a proof or anything. She was just like, "I'm here for you." You know, and my dad was a much harder sell than that. My dad didn't have a lot of respect for people who were on drugs or went to jail and that sort of thing. So I remember my mom, I called her and I told her that I was ready to stop using drugs and I was ready to come home. And she says, "I'm going to come get you." And she knew the value of striking while the iron was hot, right? Like she wasn't going to wait around until I got more drugs. She was going to come right to Portland. And she was living in Florence at the time. So she came.
Is that here in Oregon?
Yeah, Florence on the coast. Okay. So it was about an hour west of Eugene. So it was, you know, a couple 3-hour drive for her to come to Portland. And she was like, "Listen, I'm leaving right now. I'm going to get in the car and come there. Just give me the address and I'll be there. And just be looking for me in 3 hours." She wasn't going to waste no time. Yeah. So she pulled in the parking lot, and I'm out in the parking lot smoking a cigarette. And I hadn't seen my mom in, 5 years at this point. And she parked right next to me, got out of the car, and started looking around for me and did not recognize me. And I said, "Mom?" And she turned around, she looked at me, and instantly tears pouring down her face. And she says, "Honey, let's get in the car, let's go." She didn't even recognize her own son. I looked so terrible. And when I talk to her about that now, I could tell her that story tonight. I could call her on the phone and tell her that story tonight, and she'd be crying. Yeah. Because she said that it was the worst I'd ever looked. She thought I was going to die. Like I was just super skinny and just trashed. Looked awful. Wow. And so funny story, we're heading get on the freeway to head to Florence, and my mom's got the window down. She's got her head out the window, and I'm like, are you sick? And she goes, honey, you smell terrible. And I don't want to hurt your feelings, but you smell terrible. Is there a place that we can get you some clothes around here somewhere? And I said, no, I don't really know. She said, is there a Goodwill somewhere? Because Goodwill is going to be better than what you're wearing right now. So I led her to a Goodwill off of 205. I don't remember where it was at, but she had me go pick out a shirt, pants, everything, and then went to the dressing room to put it on. And she said, throw your stuff over the top, and had a garbage can out there so that my stuff just went directly in the garbage can. And one of the employees came over and said, what are you doing? She says, don't worry about it. We're going to pay up front. Just don't worry about it. I'm just, taking care of him. So I came out with, used Goodwill clothes on, and apparently it smelled better than I did because, I'd been smoking cigarettes, and she doesn't like the smell of cigarettes, and I probably didn't have the best hygiene at that point in time. So, yeah, she didn't even recognize me.
Wow.
Yeah. So she took me back to Florence, and I basically detoxed on her couch for several days, and I was an emotional mess. I could watch an ASPCA commercial on television, just bawl my eyeballs out, because it'd been the first time I'd been clean in a long time, and the littlest thing would set me off. And
yeah, what is that like?
Terrible. It's awful.
What does it feel like?
It feels like you're all of a sudden feeling feelings for the very first time in your life, and I didn't love it. Most of the time people are used to feelings and they understand how to work with them. And I think at that point, even though I'd only been out in an active addiction for, 5 or 7 years, or so, I think it was no more than 7, but I was out there long enough that I completely forgot what it was like to be a normal person that had feelings and just dealt with them.
Really?
Yeah. And I don't really think that's unique or uncommon. I think that the only difference between my story and somebody else's is the length of time in which they did drugs. Right? If they did drugs for a lot longer, I'm sure the complications were greater. But
I didn't know that was even a side effect.
Yeah, well, it definitely is for a lot of people. It was for sure for me.
Wow.
Yeah, I just didn't know how to. It was like all of a sudden you handed me a whole bag of emotions and said, "Here you go, learn to deal with them." So it was like a gigantic 5-year-old, tantrums and it was terrible. It was awful. And then, given long enough, that stuff starts to come back a little bit. But yeah, I was a mess.
Interesting.
Yeah, thank goodness for Mom.
Yeah, thank goodness for Mom. But she'd already been with a 5-year-old.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So what happened from there? From the couch, where did you go? Did you go into treatment or anything?
Yes, it's an interesting story too. So my mom just started making phone calls to treatment centers and was like, this is what's going on with my son. I need to get him in somewhere. And the only place that she could find that would take me was a 2-hour ride up the coast. And she took me up there 3 times a week. 2 hours there and 2 hours back, and would wait in the parking lot till I was done. Yep. She was diligent about it.
For how long?
It was 2 months or 3 months or something while I was in their outpatient program. But then, like I was starting to say a minute ago, I had that charges come up from previously.
Okay.
And so it was about 6 months clean when I realized I was going to be arrested and I was going to go to court over this stuff that had happened a couple of years earlier.
Do you mind sharing what some of those things were?
It was tweaker charges. That's what it was. Identity theft and and just the normal starter kit for a tweaker that you would expect.
Okay.
Yeah. And
just trying to get cash.
Trying to get drugs. It really wasn't even the cash. It was whatever I could do to get drugs. And I had a whole network of tweakers that we did that same terrible stuff to. Yeah.
All right. So I typically don't get political.
Yeah.
But I do want your opinion on this.
Okay.
Just this only. Why is President Trump's announcement that his new campaign will focus on advertising that drugs are bad for you considered an ineffective approach to addressing addiction?
Great question. I think that we would do a lot better with that question if we just eliminated President Trump from the question.
Great.
And just said, why does that approach not work?
Okay.
I think that approach...
I'm into that.
Yeah, that approach doesn't work because it's never worked.
Okay.
It's just never worked. If I walked into a room full of people and said drugs are bad and everybody was like, oh, hell yeah, or I realize it now, and they walked out, then treatment would be really short, right?
Yes, it would.
But that's not the case, and we know that that's not the case.
Yeah.
If drugs are bad worked, then people would have got it when they were my daughter's age at 5 years old when they first introduced those things to the kids at school, like the DARE program that was wildly unsuccessful. But, if that was the case, then you just told people drugs are bad, then it would have worked.
Yeah.
And it didn't.
Yeah. I was told drugs are bad.
Yeah. Me too. Me too.
Yeah.
And I think it's just like, the Department of Corrections. I worked there. I saw the flaws in the system. I hate it. Everybody knows the flaws in the system. If prison worked, no one would ever go back a second time. And so there's flaws in the argument, right? Like there's just flaws in the argument. You can't really tell somebody that drugs are bad because that's a value statement that they maybe not agree with. And if they don't agree with it and they're finding some solace in drugs or they're being effective for them, then they're not going to agree with you. And if drugs didn't work for people, they would never do them. So drugs are working. Another surprising reaction I get from clients when I talk about that is that drugs were good for them. They did something. They filled a void. They fixed something. And so therefore they kept doing it.
Self-medicating.
Yeah, self-medicating. If the very first time you smoked pot, some gigantic person just appeared and just beat the crap out of you, you probably wouldn't do it a second time. And if you did it a second time, the same thing happened, there wouldn't be a third time, right?
Yeah.
Or if people didn't get high off it, they just got violently ill and their problems were still there, they probably wouldn't do it again.
Yeah.
But that's not the case. People forget about their problems or they have a reprieve from their problems or it gives them some effect that they're not getting some other place in their life. Therefore, it's working for them. And you have to, in order to get somebody to jump on board with you, you have to point out ways that it's not working for them. And that's just that simple. But saying that drugs are bad never has worked and it never will work.
Thank you for that. That's what I was hoping you were going to say.
Oh, good. Great.
Well, I was hoping we would get to, I heard your opinions on this before, and I was hoping we would get to that.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
Yeah. So what do you think is the most common misunderstanding about people struggling with fentanyl addiction?
Oh my gosh, what a great question. Another great question. The most common misconception about people that are struggling is that you have to be some terrible person to be on fentanyl, that you have to be some scumbag living in the doorway of a church or something like that to be on fentanyl. And I think that it's been a long time since I've done drugs, and it's been a long time since I've done direct services with people in groups. But I have had the chance to sit in groups and to supervise some groups that were being done. And to see people in those groups that are attorneys or doctors or nurses and say that they're addicted to fentanyl is a shock. And when I've sort of talked to people after the group, excuse me, to find out that their drug of choice was not fentanyl, it was something different, and they were in the course of buying their drug of choice, realized their drug of choice was being laced with fentanyl, then they were becoming addicted to fentanyl. So that's not how their course started.
Yeah.
And that is a surprise. People didn't go out one day and just say, I'm going to do the worst thing with the highest probability of death, right?
Yeah.
Like that wasn't the thing.
Yeah.
Most folks weren't seeking that out. Most folks were looking for something different, and it just happened to come across their path.
Yeah.
And I've known people in my recovery that they were the last people on the planet you would look at and say, oh yeah, fentanyl addict. And there's a really strong hold that drug has on people that's unlike any other drug I've ever seen.
Like what?
For instance, when I was out doing meth, I was an IV drug user. And I never thought when I was doing drugs that it was going to be the last time I was doing a drug. I never thought I'm going to die from this, right? I had some friends that did heroin. That was always kind of a possibility that they could overdose from heroin.
Yeah.
But it wasn't super common. They weren't worried about it.
Yeah.
Now people are of the mindset that they could be dead after doing this.
Yeah.
And that's not something I ever worried about.
Yeah.
And I know tons of people in recovery that had the same story. They never worried about that. And now people are truly looking at it like, so give you an example. I was in Northeast Portland and I was getting some keys made at a place on Grand. And I go to get in my truck and there's a person lying on the floor and there's people giving him, lying on the concrete, and there's people giving him CPR, sternum rub, and they're shooting him with Narcan and stuff like that. And I, trying to jump in there and see what I could do. And the people that were being the most effective in helping this guy out were his fellow drug addicts. They had become so accustomed to doing this that they were like watching an ambulance pull up and give them services, right? Like they were doing the sternum rub, somebody grabbed ice and poured it in their hand and put it on his neck. Somebody else was doing the nasal injections with the Narcan, and it was like a well-oiled machine that these people were coming together. And what I realized is that they're doing this so much with each other that they're getting really good at doing it. And that's not a great place to be. That's terrible. That death is a reality from this, and that people overdosing is not just a reality, it's a commonplace. It's an occurrence.
Well, yeah, that, but I hadn't heard, your insight into that. Yeah, that's why my mouth's hanging open, because that hasn't been my experience, right? Yeah.
On the phone, 9 minutes with 911 on hold before somebody answered the phone. And they had already got this guy revived by the time the operator got on the phone.
Yeah.
And that's not a trash talking 911. They were probably busy that day. But still,
they're busy every day.
Yeah, exactly. They're probably busy on important calls. And I was letting them know what was happening. And they said they were going to dispatch somebody. And by the time that the ambulance got there, excuse me, by the time the ambulance got there, the guy had already made the decision he didn't need any medical care, and he was off on his way, ready to do something else. And I was like, hey, well, you probably should get checked out. And he's like, man, this is like the sixth overdose I've had in the last couple of weeks. And he says, I'm good. I know exactly what's going on. I was just that's a worldview that I'm not used to. That I was never part of my story.
He said, I'm good.
Yeah, and so he just went about his business. Didn't even go getting into the ambulance.
So people are not even afraid of the fact that they're going to die.
Maybe there's some fear there, but it certainly doesn't look like it. And that's because they've gotten used to the fact that this drug of choice carries with it the risk of that happening. And that's just awful. Like I said, I couldn't underscore it enough. That was never a consideration of mine.
That and the fact that Narcan is fairly available at this point.
Yeah, and what anybody in that business will tell you is that the fentanyl that's coming across the border from that's manufactured in the Middle East or Mexico or wherever it is that they're coming up with this,
China, yeah,
or in China, is resistant to Narcan. So they're giving them injections of Narcan 4 and 5 and 6 times before something happens.
I know.
Now there's carfentanil, and there's so many other things that are hundreds of times more potent than the original fentanyl, as if that wasn't bad enough. And it's just it's getting us to this place where, people are dying, and the number of people that are dying is just tragic.
It is.
And they're resistant to typical detox meds. So the detox is harder, it's more intense, it's more difficult for the person. There's medical complications, tons of medical complications. So it's just a different thing than I was ever used to. And people that have been in the field for many, many years are having to get re-educated on the effects of this and how to better help people.
Yeah.
Because it's just not...
It's a totally different...
Exactly,
It's a totally different scenario.
Yeah. And it's not just the folks that you would suspect are walking down the street or that are living on the street. Like I said, I've been in groups before where there were physicians and there were attorneys or nurses in the groups, and they were just as addicted to fentanyl as the guy sitting next to them.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. Being dope sick is a pretty strong motivator.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's also a motivator to get more dope.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. It can be a motivator to get more drugs.
That's the addiction right there. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. More than anything. I can't speak to it. I can't say I've ever tried it, but from what I'm told, the high is like unlike anything that anyone's ever experienced. In addition, like I've been told, like it's like being wrapped in a warm hug.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been told that one too.
Yeah, like being wrapped in a warm hug. And like just logically, that sounds beautiful, especially if you're living on the street in horrific conditions. You have no hope of changing that.
Yeah.
No one cares whether or not you do or you don't live.
Yeah.
Everyone's given up on you.
Yeah.
Who wouldn't want to be embraced in a nice warm hug?
Yep. And drift off to death.
Yeah.
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 Yep.
Except for then you wake up and you're here.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. How do we transition from that? Okay, what was it like coping with physical, emotional, and spiritual challenges in prison, where drugs often serve as a form of self-soothing despite the penalties?
Like I said earlier, I went to prison with a year clean, and so for me, there was very little temptation to be involved with drugs. I found myself being attracted to people that were in there that had also made the decision to do something better with their lives. And that could be short-lived. It also could be, it could be something that they decide to stick with for a long period of time. But at least at the time, they weren't involved in drugs. And I knew that I had a goal in mind, and I wanted to get out to be with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. I wanted to get out to be with her and to have a family with her, and that was where I was heading. And nothing was going to stop me from doing that because I had made the commitment to do that before I went in. And so everything that I looked at in there was either going to work in my favor or was going to work against me. And that was how my evaluation was done. I was just like, if I'm going to achieve these goals, it has to be because of this.
Okay, so then not your experience, but I'm sure you've heard other people's experience, right?
Yeah.
And so I guess the question is, like, drugs are fairly available in prison. Maybe not in the prison circumstances that you spoke of, but they're fairly available. And there's not much of a deterrent, right? Because prison is fairly difficult to live through as well. At least if you don't have, I won't say special circumstances, but particular circumstances that you had, right? It's very difficult to get through a term sentence of 48 months or whatever you might be sentenced to. And so I guess the question I'm asking for other people to understand what that's like is that there's a significant draw to using drugs in order to cope, right? Yeah.
So back to with the very first part of the question, to clarify, drugs are more available in prison than they are on the street.
Okay.
Like, you're never going to find a prison that doesn't have drugs in there like they're on the street. The only difference is they're going to cost you more.
Okay.
Right. And you're going to have some really strong connections in there to be able to do the drugs that you want to do. But there's never, ever been a shortage of drugs in prison. And even my experience in the prison that I was at, there were still drugs there.
There was.
Now, I'm not going to make accusations or go on a conspiracy theory, but I am going to say this. When I worked for the Department of Corrections, I worked at the state penitentiary. They had stopped all visiting because of COVID. There were no visitors inside or outside of the prison. But yet drugs were still in the prison.
Yeah.
So drugs were coming in. Drugs are coming in the prison, and there's no visitors. So you can do the math on that, but there was always a plentiful supply of drugs.
Yeah.
So for me personally, I have much more respect for a person who's been able to be clean in prison, because it's a terrible environment. It'd be really easy to want to get high, but I know a lot of guys that chose not to. One of the things that I was really happy about, it's sort of, I guess, my legacy there, and not to make it sound too incredible, but I was able to start a mentor program in there with the help of the guys that were in there, right? And the guys that had demonstrated their commitment to being clean and wanted to be mentors to people that were coming in that just had a terrible outlook on a terrible place. And it was wildly successful. It was an amazing program that just took off and that people wanted to be part of. They were like, oh, wait a second. They're not employees that are telling us how to be clean. They're people that live here showing us how to be clean. And it was just amazing to see these guys that had demonstrated their ability to stay clean to help other people to do the same. And they just realized they didn't want to be part of that anymore. They didn't want to be part of doing drugs. And it's designed, the prison system, the complex is designed in such a way where they don't really care if you're going to improve or not. They don't. If everybody cared about the outcomes, they would give folks a radio and a television when they first walked in the door. Because if you had a radio and a television as a person that was in prison, you probably wouldn't get into a lot of different problems. And the way I looked at it, it was like, just give everybody a TV and a radio, but you have to have a certain amount of clean time without problems, without disciplinary write-ups. They make it such an incentive to get that TV, and you have to buy it.
Yeah.
So you have to have resources to be able to do so.
Yeah.
Or a job that pays nothing to pay way too much for a television set 6 months later from saving. So it was just, it's if you want to be clean in prison, you're going to be clean in prison. If you want to get loaded in prison, you're definitely going to be able to get loaded. Drugs were everywhere. And like I said, even when there's no visitors coming in, the drugs are still getting in.
Yeah.
And I don't think Oregon's special. I think that's everywhere. I think that's everywhere. Everybody's experiencing the same thing.
Yeah, I was in California. We had a TV in the room, just one. And everyone fought over the remote. and then they would take it away, and then no TV privileges. So I don't know how successful one TV was, but yeah. Or
But you hear all the time people just talk about sheer boredom, and that's the reason they're getting in trouble.
oh, it's crazy. There's nothing to do.
Yeah, exactly. And so giving
Literally nothing.
Yeah, give somebody a television set. Put some educational stuff in the prison, right? Instead of putting more money into beds and badges, put more money into educational programs or mentor programs.
Or a computer.
Or a computer. Gosh, teach people how to do stuff that's going to be helpful for them when they get out.
Yeah.
But in Oregon, all of those resources aren't available to somebody until they're less than 6 months to freedom.
Yeah.
And that's terrible. You need to be working on that from day one before more problems arise.
Yeah, it's called rehabilitation.
Yeah, exactly. It's an interesting concept.
Yes, it is. No wonder your program was so successful. I mean, I think your intentions speak a lot about why it was successful, but also, it gave people hope.
Well, and we had a lot of naysayers, right? I was told by more people why it wouldn't work than why it would work, which just makes me want to work harder.
Yeah.
But I was told that I was never going to get a single African American to want to participate in the program, and I was like, "That's not going to happen. Watch and see." Because in prison, it's a little different for that particular...
You were told that?
Yeah. For that particular community, there's this like, if you're doing drugs, then you're this drug addict, right? You're like, this kind of a person.
Yeah.
And
This must be your race and color.
Yeah. All I had to do was to get folks that were influential, that were in that community, to be part of the recovery mentor program, and then folks came out of the woodwork.
Yeah.
When people were like, it's okay to come forward and talk about this, then I intentionally chose the people that I chose based on the fact that they were influential, based on the fact that people respected them, including staff.
Yeah.
And that they had demonstrated that they were done with that lifestyle 100% of the time. And we had so many people participating in that program that were able to help. That prison has no idea how many problems my team fixed before they ever became problems. People would come forward and say that they had a drug problem, but they also had a huge drug debt with people that were selling drugs in the prison. And my mentors that I hired would go fix that debt so that guy could get clean and not have to worry about having that hanging over his head.
How would they fix it?
Now, we won't talk about that, but they would fix that. And it was always very amicably done. But it was done in a fashion to where this guy felt like he could be clean and be successful. And it was an amazing program. And every time there was ever any talk about a fight going to happen or anything like that, these guys would fix those problems faster than the prison could ever even know about it. And it was just because they had been there for so long and they had navigated that system for so long and had pull with people that were important in the prison.
Wow.
That they could make stuff like that happen.
That's incredible.
It was awesome. It was an amazing experience for me. And if I would have never left that place had it not been for the staff didn't want to see it successful.
Did they torpedo it?
Absolutely, 100%. But I think that, at the time it was really hard for me to not take it personally. But I think that one of the major reasons that I think that program they attempted to torpedo that program so much is because in order for them to be able to come to work every day and to live with what they saw, they had to view those people as piles or bad people.
Yes.
And if they embraced what I was saying, then it challenged everything they'd been thinking for the last 10 or 20 years. Their belief system was rock solid.
Yeah.
And so they didn't want to do that because that maybe meant that they were doing things that they shouldn't be doing, right?
Yeah.
And so I think that that's what it was more than anything else. But we would have people coming in that our guys had scheduled to come in and talk about recovery, events that had 100 people sign up for it, and the officer that was supposed to be up on the activities floor would be like, oh, I think I'm going to go home for the day. So they couldn't have the event. Or decided he was going to take his lunch right at the beginning of the event.
Sabotage
and nobody else would go up and cover for it. And that happened numerous times. So there's just I think that it challenged people to think differently about their job, and they weren't ready to do that.
No.
They just wanted to go.
That entire system.
Yeah, they want to go collect their paycheck, go home, and get their retirement later, and not worry about the other stuff.
Yep.
But I am a firm believer that every single person in there is going to be serving my food or, seeing me in an ER or something, right? Somehow I'm going to come across them, and I want to make sure that they're going to be the very best neighbors and employees and people in society that we can possibly be. And I don't have one single concern about anybody I ever worked with in there. Like I could run into anybody on the street and it would be 100% fine. And I don't think that employees can say that.
Yeah. Well, different relationship.
Yep.
Different level of respect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you already touched on this, but you built the Recovery Mentor Program. That's what you called it, right?
Yep.
From a small initiative to serving over 600 clients with 30 mentors with a statewide impact. How did you achieve that growth, and what challenges did you face? You mentioned some of the challenges.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, first of all, we built that program. And when I say we built that program, I'm talking about a good handful of adults in custody that had the same intentions for that program that I did, that I never would have been able to build without their help. And we have a couple of them that have come out of prison that are getting jobs in the field because I was able to help them get certified as drug and alcohol counselors in prison. So they came out to great jobs and great opportunities. And I would not have been able to build that program without them. I think there's a few guys that were super instrumental in helping me with that program. And unfortunately, just as the way that it is, I ended up getting credit for a lot of that. And I want to make sure that I'm really clear about the fact that that wasn't, I might have had some really good ideas going into it, but that was a team effort. Absolutely. 100% a team effort. I think that besides employee support, I think another problem that was huge was we've never done it this way before, so we can't do it this way. And then we were building a program with no money. So there was no money to buy stuff. There was no money to be able to support that program. And so I couldn't hire people. The only thing that I could do was to do my normal job and then to do this job. That was,
Yeah.
And so I'm sure if my wife was here, she would tell you the same thing. But it probably stretched me really, really thin during the time that I was working there. Because I saw an opportunity that we could build something great. And it didn't take very long for other people to find out about it. In fact, I think that program was up and running for 4 or 5 months before I got a phone call from somebody in New Jersey that was doing a reentry conference and asked me to speak there on the program. So it didn't take very long to travel. And what it was interesting is a different state, different people, same problems, right? So the people that were in the audience were, oh, that's never going to work here. It could never work here because of da-da-da-da-da.
Yeah.
And I worked with a guy a long time ago. He's a great guy, good friend. He was a jail commander of one of the jails. And I'm going to annihilate the way he said it because he was great at the way he said it. But he would say that we can always get to a no, right? Like we need to figure out a way to get to yes. And no is always an option, right? We can always find no, but we need to work together to try to figure out a way to say yes. What's the matter with trying to find a way to say yes?
In your opinion, what makes peer recovery programs so effective for justice-involved individuals?
Well, I think that what is awesome about that particular program is the fact that the guys that were helping the people out that were in prison were wearing the same clothes, and they slept in the same place, right? They just weren't preaching from a mountaintop, right? They were guys that lived there. And so there's this automatic credibility that they get that you or I, if we were working in the prison, don't get. And when people found out that I used to be in prison and that I used to be, out doing the same kind of things that would land somebody in prison, then it gave me a level of respect that was different from other staff.
Street cred.
But I'm still staff, right? Like I was still staff.
Yeah, they still respect you.
Excuse me. So I think that was one of the things that made it really powerful is the fact, and it's the same thing that makes mentoring powerful out here too, is that it's the lived experience piece, right? It's not just somebody that read a book and is now telling you how to do these cool interventions. It's somebody that's like, hey, this works for people, and I see this, that work for other people. You should give it a shot.
And I tried it myself.
Right, and I tried it myself. And people understand also that unlike being a drug and alcohol counselor or a mental health counselor, to be a mentor, you have to have that lived experience.
Yep.
You don't have to have that lived experience.
Yep.
And addiction is one of those interesting beasts anyway, because most people are looking for a counselor or for a mentor that has been there and done that. And that's kind of the only field that we do this, right? It's not absolutely important to have an oncologist who's had cancer. Like, that's not important. You just want the oncologist that's the best cancer doctor that you can get. You're never going to have a question for him about, excuse me, ma'am, did you have cancer yourself, right? Like, that's never going to be a question. All they want is, can you give me the best care possible so I can get through this?
Yep.
But for some reason, that's really important when we're looking for a drug and alcohol counselor. So there's some uniqueness to this field, and it's all really based on the lived experience.
I agree. Yeah. It gives you more empathy and compassion.
Yep, it does. Yeah, it does.
And, valid point, like a mental health counselor sitting across from you that's been through a divorce, that's giving, that is giving you advice on your divorce.
Yeah.
is more useful than somebody who's read about it in a book or
Yeah.
heard about it from
Yep.
other people,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. How do resiliency, protective factors, and client strengths improve engagement and outcomes in recovery?
That sounds really familiar. That sounds really, really familiar.
You mentioned I was taking notes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that those things, when I'm doing a training on those things, I really try to focus on positive psychology. I really try to focus
Yes, you
on
do.
the things that
And motivational interviewing.
Yeah, motivational interviewing for sure. I think of like the car is positive psychology. Motivational interviewing is sort of the driver of the car, right? Like it's really easy for us to sit down and figure out what's wrong with somebody. It's really difficult to figure out what's right with them, and it's a twist to things that people aren't used to. So when I'm talking to a client, or even when I'm talking to employees and teaching them how to be better clinicians, I want them to focus on the resiliency and the protective factors, because if anything, those are the things that have made them any success in their lives, right? Any small amount of success that they've had or large amount of success, it's because of those things, right? And during the course of those questions and finding out those things, I find out about Uncle Joe that's always been there for him. That's great. And that as long as they're clean, Uncle Joe's there for him. And I find out those sort of things that I wouldn't find out about if it was just handing a diagnosis to them and sending them on their way. So I find out about a strong sense of spirituality, or they belong to a church, or they belong to a community of people that care about them. Those are things that are really going to help them in their recovery, right?
Yeah.
The diagnosis is just going to help explain their addiction. And I know that insurance companies need to have it and they need to get paid, and I understand that there's a reason for that stuff. But to me, it's the least important thing. I think the most important thing is to discuss with that person the things that are going to keep them clean once they are clean, right? The things that are going to make them successful. And I said this the day of the training that you and I were part of, and I kind of just always will say it, is that in drug and alcohol treatment, we do a pretty good job of teaching people how not to use drugs, but we really don't emphasize how to live a life worth living, right? We don't give them that. And even when you go to mental health counseling, by and large, I'm not saying this about everybody, but by and large, the point is, hey, I'm going through this divorce, I need help. Well, once you get through the divorce, then you're off and running again, right? Like whatever this downfall is, then you fix this thing, this deficit, right? And then you're back out on the street, you're back doing your thing again. It would be great to live in a world where we normalize counseling, that you went to a counselor when things were going good.
Yeah.
You went to talk to a counselor because things are going great, and I just got to figure out how to keep that momentum going. And people look at me like, well, you're crazy. That's not what counselors are for. But that's not what we use them for, but that's what they can be for.
Yeah.
If we were just able to get to that point where we normalized counseling, we normalized being around a therapist to be able to use for not just bad times or things that were deficits, but for great stuff, right? To continue on that momentum.
Well, we've come a long way in the sense that we at least have, I mean, it's pop psychology, but we at least have more awareness. Generations below us have more awareness of mental health conditions, diagnosis. We have more awareness around personal growth.
Yeah.
And self-awareness than the boomers raised us.
Yep.
You know, like I was raised like no child of mine is going to a therapist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, because there was this thing that if you went to a therapist.
There was a huge stigma.
Yeah, exactly. There's
something really significantly wrong, and you didn't have to be schizophrenic to show up in a therapist's office or to have issues as a child.
Yeah, and what you just said is absolutely true. There's something wrong with you if you're going to go to a therapist, not something right with you, right?
Yeah.
There's something wrong with you that we're going to fix, and all of a sudden this is therapist. It's incumbent upon the therapist to teach you how to fix whatever the problem is. When all of the best quote unquote fixes I've ever seen come from within.
Yes.
Right? They're things that the person already has. All you as the therapist is doing is help drawing it to the surface.
Yeah.
So it's those pieces of resiliency, those protective factors, the sense of community, those things that we know that are going to not just help a person get clean and sober or start living the life that they need or whatever it is regarding their mental health, but propel them into the future with that as well.
As someone who has worked closely with the public defender's service, I guess, I don't know why I said service office. What changes do you think the justice system needs to support mental health and recovery better?
Great question. Yes, I've had the privilege of working with the Public Defender Service as a board member for the last 7 or 8 years. And in fact, I'm the only non-attorney position on the board. And I feel like that's a great privilege to be able to be there and to help, steer that. The biggest change that needs to be made with the public defender service is to cap their caseloads and make it to where they can put more time into the folks that they have, as opposed to just having these endless piles of caseloads on them. Because it's not that the attorneys don't want to do good, but sometimes they're meeting their client for the first time in the hallway before they go into court.
Yeah.
And that's not their fault entirely, right? That's just they have these absurd caseloads of people.
So hire more people?
Well, hire more people and also just normalize a smaller caseload, right? If you're a private attorney, you don't have that many people on your caseload.
It depends. I know some attorneys who who do, right?
Yeah, and so if you just...
My divorce attorney admitted that she had over 50 cases, over 50. How do you keep it all straight?
So if you gave any public defender in Oregon 50 cases, they would thank you. Okay. They're dealing with so many more than that. It's absurd.
Okay.
It's ridiculous. There's
like
not enough hours in the day.
Give us an idea.
Well over 100.
Okay.
Well over 100. And I'm only speaking conservatively now. But so many cases that if you put 1 hour to every one of those clients a week, you would never have enough hours.
Yeah.
Never. So you're only doing these brief interactions with people when they're walking into court.
Yeah.
And so, this is not something that is like a big secret to anybody, but if you walked into a county jail and just told everybody in the county jail, don't take a plea agreement, take everything to court. Everybody in this jail, listen to me, don't take a plea agreement on anything, take everything to court. It would immediately overload the system, it would crash. Immediately. That's not a secret, that's not a conspiracy, that's just the real deal, because everybody resolves their case through a plea agreement. I was talking to a guy that was a prosecutor, and he was getting ready to retire. And I said, man, I bet you've seen a lot of crazy court cases in your career, because he had been there at the DA's office for 30 years.
That's what my dad did.
Oh, is it? Mm-hmm. He'd been to court 9 times in 30 years. 9 court cases that he fought with a jury and everything 9 times in 30 years.
Really?
And he said, I just didn't realize when I went to law school that I was going to be pleading people out all day long. 9 times in 30 years. That's not even once a year.
I got to go back to my dad and see how many times.
Yeah, the idea of having a trial and going...
He had trials all the time,
yeah.
So I don't know. A lot has probably changed since the 80s.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And he walked into the jail and just said to everybody, and everybody agreed with you that they were going to take their case to court, it would never work. It would crash the system. There's not enough time in the day. There's not enough prosecutors. There's not enough defense. There's not enough judges. But everybody is encouraged to take a plea agreement. Everybody pleads their case out. And then, unfortunately, you have to do it from jail. And so that makes it to where you don't make the best decisions, right? You're trying to get out of jail. You're trying to move on to the next phase. Whether it's prison or getting out or whatever it is. You try to get out to do the next thing.
Yeah, and you're just like, I'll take it.
Yeah, whatever. Exactly. Yeah. And if you could mount your defense from the free world, it would be a whole different story than doing it from inside. And people are counting on that.
And the resources.
And the resources, yeah.
You don't have the resources. I remember going through my second DUI, and I remember specifically saying, I'm not saying that, I would consider myself, being able to cover my expenses. How about that? And not necessarily well off. Yeah. And at the time I was like, I knew almost every single person in my program was driving without a license, was driving with was taking so many risks because they couldn't afford to pay the penalties that came along with what was 100%. Required of them.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, I sold my vehicle in order to do it. And I'm glad that I had a vehicle that I could sell in order to pay for my attorney and all of the fees and everything that came along with it. So I was very fortunate. But one step away from not being able to make it happen.
Absolutely,
right? Yeah. And there are so many people that are stuck in the system because they do not have the resources. They don't have the support.
Yep. And one of the most terrible things about it, when you get out of prison or out of jail, you're expected to be a law-abiding, tax-paying, accountable citizen day one.
Yep.
Right? And, where's your job? How about your restitution you have to pay or your child support that you're back behind on? And that's immediate. There's no ramp up. There's no soft landing.
Nope.
It's just an immediate expectation that you're going to be just like everybody else in your age cohort that's doing what they're supposed to be doing.
And how do you get hired?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
How do you get hired? It's not just trying to find a job. It's trying to find a job as with a history
Right.
that is deeply frowned upon and or discouraged and or marginalized or
Sure. Absolutely.
yeah.
And there are employers that are taking full advantage of that.
Yes.
They know that you have a felony record, so they can pay you the least amount they can get away with
Yes.
paying and have you working 39 hours a week so they don't have to pay your benefits.
Yes.
Yeah, there are employers that are fully taking advantage of that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. You're getting me all riled up.
Perfect.
Okay. Let's see. You've covered a lot of this. Okay. How has becoming a husband and father shaped your perspective on life and recovery?
Oh my gosh,
We're shifting gears.
Oh, that's fine. That's great to do that. My wife and my children are absolutely everything.
You have two?
I have two. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a daughter that's 5 and a daughter that's 1. And
You have a brand new baby.
yeah, she's pretty brand new. She was born in September, so she's like 15 or 16 months old right now. And that's just everything. I've often sat there looking at them, just figuring out, like, I hope that everything works out in the future and that you don't end up anywhere like your dad at all. I hope that they end up like their mom and not have those issues or those problems, because I mean, I know that addiction is indiscriminate, but I really, really hope that that's not. They never had to see their dad use. I mean, a lot of years from using, but I really hope that they don't have to travel that road.
Well, they have a pretty good role model.
Yeah, they have their mom. She's amazing. She's the strongest person I've ever met.
Besides you?
Nope, she's definitely the strongest.
Yeah, she sat with you through the whole thing, huh?
She did. She told me when I was going into prison that she had a couple years in her to wait, but probably not 4. So hurry up and get through the program. So I did. I had all the incentive I needed. And I know, looking back at it, she'd have waited the whole 4 years, I'm sure. But she was trying to spur me along to get through that. Yeah, she's pretty amazing.
Looking ahead, how do you envision the future of addiction recovery and mental health treatment evolving?
Boy, there's a whole podcast episode by itself. Addiction's getting worse. Insurance companies are getting worse. Their desire to pay for things is getting worse. And I hope that my prediction does not come true, but I think that what we're going to see happening is that inpatient and residential facilities are going to be a thing of the past. I don't think we're going to see them very soon. In my career, before my career is over, we're going to see residential and inpatient facilities just as a thing of the past.
Why?
Because what insurance companies are doing is they're diligently collecting data on success rates. And so they're seeing that there's really no difference between sending somebody to residential versus sending somebody to intensive outpatient. And the insurance company's job is to say no, right? Like, that's their job, is to not pay for things. That's what they want to do, is not pay for things. They're in a money-making business that they want to make money. And they can't. If they sent everybody to residential, there's no way they'd make money.
Right.
So even Medicaid is starting to put stiffer stipulations on what they're going to pay for and what they're not going to pay for. And the rate that Medicaid pays for detox is much lower than a private or commercial rate. It's not, they do a good job for outpatient, but it's not the same for residential. The residential payment that they make, their per diem, is way less than what private insurance is. And what we're seeing happen a lot, and this is only in the last couple of years, is to go detox to IOP. So you see people go to detox and then go right to outpatient. And so some of that is actually, some of that to a degree is good, because, there's a lot of people out there that are the primary breadwinner in their family, and they can't be gone for 30 days because they don't have that much of a savings account to pay for bills. So they have to just go for a quick spin dry and then back to work again. So outpatient makes much more sense for them, and they'll just white knuckle it through the process.
Wow.
But we're going to see a time where inpatient and residential is only a thing for rich people that can pay for it and pay cash, because insurance companies are not going to pay it anymore.
Like another chance.
Yeah. It's just going to be that way. It's just going to be where people are The insurance companies are not going to want to continue paying for people. And what they have evidence to support their claim and their theories on this is that people go to inpatient 5 and 6 and 7 and 10 times and don't change.
True.
And they still go to outpatient a bunch of times and don't change. So what's the point, right?
Yeah.
And I understand what the value of residential is, and I'm not saying that for us.
What do you think the value of residential is for people who are not in this kind of work?
The value of residential is that we can get people into an environment where they can solely focus on their recovery, where they can solely focus on getting to the root cause of some of the problems. Can you develop that can you take that and do it in different environments? I'm sure we could try to figure out ways to do it, but really the primary reason that I'm a big advocate of going to residential is because it gives somebody the chance to check out for a while and to get to a place where it's like this utopian environment where they can just work on themselves and learn how to rely on those protective factors and that resiliency and just sort of get out of that for a while. Mm-hmm. The good thing is also the problem, though, because when you take somebody out of their environment, you put somebody in this utopian environment that everything's great. It's not realistic. Not sustainable. Yeah, it's not sustainable. It's not a picture of what the world looks like.
Yeah.
They're still going to leave that treatment center and go back to their environment that got them into the problems in the first place.
Yeah. And the problems. Yeah.
And the problems are there still, right? They didn't go away. The problems didn't go to treatment, right?
Yeah.
Just the individual did.
Yeah.
So what I have been a proponent of for a long time is that, treatment centers give people passes to go with their families and to go be with their families if they've done, a month or 3 weeks or something well. I think we should let people go back to their families on day 3 or day 4. Go back and get some problems, come back and talk about them, right?
So do group.
Yeah, and they just get a chance to go out and get some real life exposure and then come back and realize like, hey, the problems are still there. I need to dig a little deeper on some of these things. My wife's still mad at me, or the kids are still resentful, or instead of going to this environment that's everything's great because the mom or the dad or whoever is at home is having to deal with the problems in their absence.
Yep.
So when they get out, there's a lot of resentment there.
Yep.
And there's issues there. So it's the curse and the cure at the same time, right?
Okay.
But one of the things that a lot of these really progressive agencies are doing is they're starting to do like at-home residential treatment and at-home detox. And they're trying to rethink the way that we do treatment because we shouldn't be really bragging about our success rates, right? Like we do what we can, but they're not like they're kind of rates where if you were a private investor, you'd say, I'm going to put all my money into this organization because they're killing it.
Yeah.
It's not one of those things. So they're trying to reinvent how they do things. And COVID also taught us that you don't really need to be in a center to do some of that stuff, right? Mm-hmm. So there's some treatment centers that are doing at-home detox, or they're doing at-home residential, and the people are getting their detox meds for the day, and a nurse is doing a check-in with them over Zoom, and then maybe once every other day coming to their home. And so they're doing that, and they're not experiencing any difference in success than a person that's in a facility.
Interesting.
And so I don't know what the data looks like. I've heard that,
okay.
But believe that the insurance companies will be using that data to show why they don't need to have a building to go to and pay $1,400 a day for a person to be in treatment there.
Yeah. What advice would you give someone considering a career in behavioral health or addiction recovery?
Don't do it. No, I'm kidding.
Shit, it's too late.
Yeah, it's too late, darn it. What I would definitely tell them a couple of things. Number one is work on yourself before you go into the field, because a lot of people with big hearts end up trying to get their resolution to their problems to their clients, and that's terrible. And also have a really strong self-care game, because that is key to being around for a long time.
Yeah.
When I first got in the field, I was told that it was 7 years, and that was the burnout. And so I had a plan where I was going to end up being a supervisor before that 7 years came around. And then I always had a plan B. I love to cook, and I thought, if this whole counseling thing doesn't work out, I'm going to go to work in a restaurant. I'm going to make the best of it. But yeah, have a plan B if it doesn't work, which is one of the reasons I really like teaching at the college, is because I can tell folks in those intro classes, like, this is what this really looks like, in this.
I didn't know you taught.
Yeah.
Do you teach at PCs?
No, I taught at Lower Columbia up until just recently, and I teach a couple classes at Rutgers.
Okay.
Yeah. So one of the things I really try to teach people is that give them a realistic picture of what it looks like. Because I think people walk into it thinking it's going to be like Good Will Hunting. They're going to get this major breakthrough with somebody. And that's just not what it is, right? Like more often than not, you're going to have clients that are just, in a bad state. And they're going to be working on their problems. And it's not going to be that.
Yeah.
There's not going to be the clouds separate moments all the time.
Yeah,
so
no.
the other thing I tell them is
canceling people through their problems.
Yeah. The other thing I try to tell people is when you do get one of those moments, cherish it, love it, and be able to reflect back on it at some other point in time because it's not going to happen all the time.
Yeah.
I would love to say that it's going to happen all the time, but it doesn't.
Yeah.
And you're going to spend 60% of your life doing paperwork and authorizations and utilization reviews and stuff that is just not what you went to school for. But it's how you get paid. So get a really good picture. The other thing that I would I got a whole list of things I would tell people.
Okay.
But the one thing I would tell people is before your internship or before you've put a lot of time into that, go to work at a treatment agency, volunteer for a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And get a really good feel for what happens behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Because you might change your mind.
Yeah.
And after a couple of weeks, if you really like it still, then you're sick like the rest of us and go for it.
Okay.
Yeah.
What lessons have you learned from your 15 plus years in the behavioral health field that you want to pass on to others?
You can never tell by looking at somebody if they're going to be the success or not. Right? I've been wrong about that so many times, right?
Have
I just
you?
thought, oh, this is the guy. This is the woman that's going to make things, it's going to make, and it's not. Like you can, I've had a couple pretty good guesses with people, but by and large, like you can't just look at somebody and tell that they're going to be the success or not. I had a client many years ago in residential, and he was in residential at that particular facility like the 15th time. And when I first started there, the other counselors were like, "Hey, this is your guy. You can have him." And I didn't love that because I thought that everybody had given up on this guy. And so I brought him into my office, and I was new, and I still thought it was all like Good Will Hunting, right? And so I said, what can I do for you to help you be successful this time around? And he said, and I'll never forget, he said, just treat me like it's not my 15th time here. And I said to him, all right, I'll do that. What makes this time different? And it was just the question that he needed to hear.
Yeah.
And it just something he ran with. And later on, I found out he had it tattooed on his chest here so he could look in the mirror and see what makes this time different. Yeah. And he went on to take my classes at the college, became a drug and alcohol counselor, clinical supervisor. He's a program manager of a program now. But you never know when somebody's time to get it is. So you just have to do the best you can to treat everybody like this is the time they get it.
You're pretty amazing.
Oh, well, thank you. Appreciate that.
Where can listeners or viewers learn more about your work and your programs or upcoming initiatives?
Okay, great. I work at 4D Recovery in Portland. I'm the clinical director for 4D Recovery. I have a small business called Healing Associates, LLC, and it's available online. You can go check it out, healingassociates.org. And
we'll put a link in the notes.
Oh, sweet. Thanks.
Yeah.
I do clinical supervision. I do speaking engagements. I do some teaching stuff. And
you've been on TEDx?
I have, yeah. It was one of their featured TED Talks for 4 years or 5 years on TED.com.
What was your talk about?
The 3 E's of successful reentry. I talked about my personal experience and also working with justice-involved people, because if you don't fix the environment and education and employment, then you're not really going to give people the things that they need. And so the idea that we're returning people to the same environment that got them into trouble to start with, we're not giving them additional tools, we're not giving them additional education. And there's this expectation that people become productive members of society day one, and that's just unrealistic.
Yeah.
Not unless we're giving them the things that they need.
Yeah.
And without that environment, that education and employment, they're not going to be successful. And all of the research that's out there shows that employment is one of the biggest indicators of success in people, because it gives them a great sense of self-efficacy. And without that employment, without a living wage job, what do we expect for people to do?
Yeah.
So that was what the TED Talk was about.
I'll have to go check it out.
Yeah.
Yeah,
14 minutes, you'll never get back.
I'll put a link to that too for anyone who wants to watch or listen to it.
All right.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate what you shared. Appreciate your insights. Super valuable. As you noticed, there was a couple of times where I had to close my mouth, just because you have a different. I'm not saying that my experience wasn't valuable, because it absolutely was. But you definitely have done this a lot longer, and you have valuable information that I think most people need to hear, especially if they're not working in this field.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're welcome. For anyone that's listening or watching, you want to know more about me, you can find me at Andrea.Love. And thank you again, Dr. Nick. I really appreciate you.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for tuning in and supporting this podcast. Your presence here means the world to me, and I'm truly grateful for your time and energy. If this conversation resonated with you or sparked any questions, feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I love hearing from each of you. Your insights, experiences, and curiosities always enrich this space. It's important to remember that trauma, often unseen and unacknowledged, can keep us from living fully in our joy. Through my intuitive healing process, I help release the weight of generational trauma, empowering you to reconnect with your true self and experience life in greater harmony. If you feel called to explore this deeper work, I invite you to book a one-on-one intuitive session, or even embark on a personalized journey with a Phoenix Immersion, a 2-day retreat designed to support profound transformation. You can find all the details below. For those who've liked, subscribed, or left comments already, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your engagement means everything, and I'm deeply grateful for the connection we're building in this community. If you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing so. I'm excited for all the healing and transformation we'll continue to explore together. As always, I'm forever grateful for you, and I cannot wait to see what unfolds next. Take care, and until next time.